Hey, I'm Matt at MrMaple.com, and today I'm coming to you to bring you a commonly asked question. We love these commonly asked questions. When you bring up questions in our Facebook group, Mr. Maple Friends, or underneath our videos here on the Mr. Maple Show, we love to do videos for you about that. So today we're going to be talking about staking a Japanese maple. Now, staking a Japanese maple, the best time to do that is in early spring. The reason why we do that in early spring is because the foliage is high in sap and it's much more flexible. You'll find that later in the summer, once that growth is hardened off, it may be much harder to bend and much more likely to break when you're trying to bend that foliage. Now, there's some basic tools you can use when you're doing this. You can go as fancy as having a professional nursery staking gun. This basically has a staple and allows you to fasten the tree around it very tightly, but also that tape will expand. So it'll expand as the tree grows and so not to break. Now, a small stake is ideal. We use bamboo canes here at the nursery. They're a cheap, inexpensive way to stake your trees, but be advised, any basic straight cane is gonna work, any basic small stick. A really cheap and easy way to stake trees, especially to a taller height, are old tent posts from broken tents. I actually have used that on an Inaba in my yard, and by continually staking it up, I got the Inaba to around 12 feet. Not something you'd see naturally occurring. So you are playing with the shape a little bit on these by staking them. Don't feel like you have to stake a Japanese maple. We're gonna go over how to stake one. Most of your lace leaves are gonna make more of that low cascading umbrella. So they're naturally gonna wanna make more of a small cascading umbrella shape. And they're gonna fill out over time and kind of slowly mound their way up. But by staking one, you can get one much taller, much faster, because they're gonna continue to weep from that uppermost point. So here at the nursery, we often use these professional staking guns that go around the tree and clamp this green ribbon together with a staple. But a lot of people don't have this in their home. And so it's not necessarily something you need to stake a Japanese maple. We're just gonna use a simple cane here. This is just a bamboo pole, but this can simply be done with things like twist ties. So these are just simple twist ties. You can get them off of a bread basket or these actually came off some of the electronics in the podcast room. But you can use these to simply stake your Japanese maple and create a little bit more of that upright habit. Now, this is a little bit of a nurseryman trick, because what you do, especially with a lace leaf, when you get those staked up like this, and you can buy special twist ties just for staking. You can get as fancy with this as you want. But simple breadstick twist ties are going to work for most gardeners. Or bread bag, like what comes off a bread bag. Now, by creating this kind of shape, this tree is going to automatically weep from that uppermost point. So we've created a higher break for this tree, and it's going to make that umbrella from there either way. So you've actually created a faster growing Japanese maple. You've expanded the height of your lace leaf upward, and you've created a tree that's going to be much bigger, much faster. So this is a great way to stake a Japanese maple. Now, be conscious, you want to check those stakes. Oftentimes, the twist ties will be metal. You'll never think a Japanese maple grows faster than when you twist tie one really tightly, because they'll grow through them very, very quickly. So it is something you want to check. Typically by about midsummer, that growth is hardened off and you don't really need it staked any longer. So after a few months, that summer rigidity is kind of set in with the Japanese maple and the stake may not be needed. Now, I like to stake them when I plant them just to increase the shape and kind of play with it how I want to do it. But that's a great way to stake your lace leaf Japanese maple and kind of get a little bit more height out of it right away. So next up on the table, I have one that is actually named after a friend of ours from Japan called Acer palmatum Chica. Now, this one's going to be very similar to a Ryusen style Japanese maple. Now, the unique thing about this form and this style Japanese maple is that they get about as tall as you stake them. So you can stake these up to get some height to them and then let them cascade down from the uppermost point. So by staking this Japanese maple ever so slightly, just a little bit higher, we've created a tree that's going to continue to put on a little bit of height from that weeping point, but we're going to get that cascading, branching, and arching down from here. Now, you may have noticed when I did this, some of this foliage is upside down now. Don't worry, Japanese maples will flip over in about 2 to 3 days. It's actually a really interesting process. Even that foliage that's upside down will slightly rotate over, and then you'll start to see cascading umbrellas come off this. So this one's going to make a very similar shape to Ryusen and just weep down from here. And it makes an excellent way to grow this one. So you can kind of play with it and stake it about as big as you want. Now, there may be some certain upright types, like this is a Bloodgood, and I think this is a great example of a tree that doesn't need a stake at this point. This is a young 1-gallon Bloodgood. Don't expect Japanese maples to be perfectly symmetrical. Some people want them to be very cookie cutter in their shape, And I think this one has a great shape. It's not something you have to do, but if you wanted to, you certainly could take this Bloodgood and create more of a central leader to an upright, staking it this way, and getting a little bit more of that uniformity. Now again, this isn't something that's required with a Japanese maple, but it can be done that easily. So don't be afraid to stake your lace leaves, your weeping forms, or your uprights. But remember, spring is the best time to do it because they're so full of sap and they're so much more malleable. You're able to bend that foliage and best shape it the way you would like. So you can kind of put your imprint on the tree a little bit more. Now, don't expect Japanese maples to be perfectly symmetrical. I think as Americans, oftentimes we expect them to be, you know, kind of this one cookie cutter idea of Japanese maples. And that's not always what's enjoyed in Japan. I have a good friend in Japan who sells Yama Momiji, meaning Japanese maples from the mountains. And those kind of have that windswept look. They have less natural, less symmetrical shapes. And that's often the most desired Japanese maples in Japan. So we hope you enjoyed this quick look at how to stake a Japanese maple. This was a really simple idea of how to do it with bread ties. You can also use, you know, the more expensive nursery staker, but both ways work great. Now remember, if you don't stake this, something like Crimson Queen's just going to slowly mound its way up and make a great shape. So it doesn't necessarily have to be staked. In fact, if you're looking for a dwarf Japanese maple, it's going to grow much slower mounding its way up. So I hope you enjoyed this quick look at how to stake a Japanese maple. Hope this gave you more confidence in gardening with Japanese maples. As always, subscribe to our 10 at 10 emails on MrMaple.com. God bless and have a great day.